Welcome back to another Star Minigaming YouTube video. This is topic of the week response video to Vince's video on the FAQ that GW just put out. I'm getting ahead of myself here. And I real briefly went through it and looked over it, and I wanted to talk about things that Vince didn't necessarily directly address, or at least in much detail in his video. Obviously, I don't like the whole models, bases don't really matter. I've never been, a huge fan of just the plain base, like, this guy's in the middle of work. I don't really like the plain black base or just painted. It doesn't look good. At least I don't think it does. I prefer there to at least be some effort to make the base kind of elevate the model to make it look more alive. And considering the fact that GW always does this in their pictures, that just kind of furthers the need for that for myself. And then, in all their pictures of Age of Sigmar, like where they have demo games or models set up as if they're fighting on a game table, they never have the bases overlapping each other. So I find it a strange rule that it'd basically be like, yeah, just stick the models on each other's bases. Bases don't matter. It's, from the weapon to their opponent. As opposed to, like, every other game that they make, you measure from the base of the model. Lord of the Rings, you measure from the base of the model. 40K, you measure from the base of the model. Obviously, things like tanks and all are a little bit different. But anyways, getting past that one, I broke it down into what I disliked and what I liked, what I thought was, good kind of clarifications on the rules. So we'll start with the dislikes first, get them out of the way. First thing I don't like that they kind of ruled on was stackable abilities. I don't really like, I don't like the ability to pour on the same ability over and over and over onto an ally. For example, they said that you can, like Mystic Shield the same unit twice or more. And I just don't like the ability in Age of Sigmar to auto-pass things, right? I don't like the ability to buff yourself to such a point that your opponent models can't hurt the target, right? So if you have a 3-up save and you sit on a hill and you cast Mystic Shield on yourself, if you're a mage, then you're unable to even be hurt unless your opponent can inflict mortal wounds or have rend. And so kind of later in the game, the fact that you can completely deny your opponent even the opportunity to win is a big problem, in my opinion. They also said that you can repeat named characters. So to be able to bring 2 Archaons or 2 Nagash models is a big no-no in my opinion. I've never seen it done. I know it's probably just theoretical, but I hate the idea of it. There's 1 Nagash, there's 1 Manfred, there's 1 Vlad, there's 1 Neferata, there's 1 Sigmar, there's 1 Archaon. That's just the way it is, and that's how it should be. Bringing multiple of something, especially on the power level of a Skarbrand or a Nagash or an Archaon, is utterly ridiculous, in my opinion, and should never happen. I don't ever have a problem with people bringing more than 1 named character. I believe I've already done it myself in a couple games with Archaon and Vlad, but don't bring repeats of the same character. It's stupid. It ruins the immersion in a lot of ways, and should just not be allowed. It's not allowed in their other games. Again, Lord of the Rings, there's only 1 Sauron, there's only 1 Aragorn. Even though there's multiple profiles for those characters and some other ones, you only get to bring the 1 of each of them. As I said before, with the stackable abilities, I don't like the auto-pass ability. I don't like the ability to make it where you hit on 1s or you wound on 1s or you save on 1-ups. I don't like the ability to auto-pass anything. Again, looking at their other games in 40K, for example, even if you got to the highest weapon skills or the highest ballistic skills in the game, there's still long odds, yes, but there's still odds that you miss, right, in your close combat attack or miss in your ranged attack. And in the Lord of the Rings game, the only automatic anything is Legolas hitting a target if he chooses to sacrifice 2 of his 3 shots to allow 1 of his shots to automatically hit, but then you're still rolling to wound. So there's not really precedent for it in their other games, at least the 2 systems that I'm very familiar with. And I think it's, honestly, I think it's stupid. I hate for there to ever be ability in a probability-based game to get probability up to 100% for something to happen. I just don't think it belongs. So for myself, in the FAQ they did say, you know, that you can always house rule and that they encourage that. These are just kind of the standardizations. That has been house ruled and will continue to be house ruled in every game that I play. There is no such thing as an auto pass. Ones will always fail regardless of, you know, if you throw 8 Mystic Shields on someone sitting on terrain and they would normally have a 2-up save. They are a 2-up. Or else, you know, we might look at the other games, maybe like Lord of the Rings or like in 40K where they both have the kind of reroll. So for example, if we were, you know, if you were a 2-up and you became what would be a 1-up, but since we aren't allowing that in our personal games, maybe you became a 2-up, rerolling needing a 6-up, right? If you fail initially. Something like that. Because again, I hate the ability to spam buffs to where something becomes automatic. It just has no place, in my opinion, in the game. And I also hate that casualties for summoned units count. You know, it doesn't make much sense to me. I don't understand why you would be playing any kind of game to begin with that you're really concerned with how many kills you're making of your opponent. If you're playing any kind of kill anything game, then it needs to be, and you're playing against a summoning based army, then you should automatically rule out any kind of like whichever side inflicts the most casualties wins, unless you want to modify it to where the army that's doing the summoning, you need to kill their summoners or their starting summoners or their commander or whatever, because it, in my opinion, breaks the game. Not in the sense that the rules break, but kind of the narrative behind Age of Sigmar, behind the game that you're playing, and really the game mode itself. It no longer makes sense. If your summoner can, you know, for the Death faction, for example, since I play them, if your Vampire Lord can continue to raise more skeletons and more zombies, what does he or she care that they're dying? That has no implication on the greater war at hand, right? When compared to like the Free Peoples or the Stormcast or whoever else it might be that is falling in combat against them. Because if they're skeletons, then unless you completely obliterate them, they're just going to be raised back up again after you've cut them down, and to a lesser degree the zombies as well. And your own dead too. So, you know, for most summoning armies, it's like, and even the Seraphon, you know, and Chaos is obvious as well, just like Death faction, but even the Seraphon, the numbers don't matter that you lose. The summoners can continue to bring them in. Now that's both game mechanics true and narrative true. So why the units that you summon should ever matter in a scenario is quite frankly beyond me. For scoring, I mean. And then lastly, I disliked their ruling on moving through friendly models. Most of their other game, or 40K for example, you can move through allied models pretty freely. There's some instances where it can hinder you, but the majority of the time it's not a problem. In Lord of the Rings, you need to have a large enough gap between friendly models to be able to physically move the model's base through, to be able to do it. And in Age of Sigmar, because we've already been told that bases don't really matter, this kind of brings up the question, because they don't clarify one way or the other, do you need to have enough room for the physical model to fit through, or do you need to have enough room for the base to fit through in between them? Because if it's the base, well, why now and not before does this matter? And, you know, if the physical model, am I allowed to take my Stormcast and turn him sideways and have him sort of shimmy in between, you know, his allies as he goes by? I don't, again, this comes back to, there's a problem whenever you don't have bases contribute anything significant to the game in terms of the rules, and I feel like this is another place where that kind of problem arises. But enough of the negativity on it. Things I really did like. The ignoring wounds abilities can stack. So if you have a commander that says, you know, on a 5-up, you ignore the wounds that you took, and your model has an ability that says, you know, on a 6-up, you ignore the wounds that you took, and neither of those are like armor saves, then you can take both of those on top of your save. I like that. Again, that kind of takes precedence in their Lord of the Rings game. You had an ability called Fury that some of the evil armies had access to, like orcs and goblins and Uruk-hai, where, you know, basically like a shaman would cast this spell and get everyone up into such a rage that they could shrug off potential wounds on a 5-up. And if you cast this onto a, you know, if they used it, it was like a bubble effect around the caster. And if you had a hero of the same race, so if an orc shaman cast it, if there was an orc hero within range, heroes had what was called Fate, where on a 4-up they would ignore a wound, and those stacked. So you could take your Fury save of a 5-up, and then if you failed that, you could expend one of your points of Fate, which you had a limited number of, and on a 4-up ignore the wound. So I liked it that that's kind of carried over. I always thought it was a good mechanic, and unlike, you know, things being an auto pass, there's still a probability of you failing one of those saves, no matter how many of them you take, assuming that, you know, that you actually have to roll and that they're not somehow buffed all the way to an auto pass. So I'm okay with that. I like that they clarified that if you take casualties in a unit in such a way that the unit is basically split into 2 smaller groups, they're out of cohesion, that you don't have to move to forcibly reform them. You can opt to just stay where you are. I thought that was pretty self-explanatory initially, but clearly some people disagreed, and so I'm glad that they addressed it. And I feel like that is the most logical answer. You shouldn't have to pull out of combat just to regroup because there were some casualties taken. I like that they cleared up the wound allocation. I know that there have been some question on if a model had taken a wound in one combat phase, does that model have to continue to take the next wound that comes into the squad via combat, via shooting, via magic, whatever it might be? And they answered yes. You should only ever have one model in the squad that's taken any wounds at one time, which is, again, how I played it. That's, again, in part to their other systems, kind of mirroring that to a degree. And it's, to me, what's logical. It's the least amount of bookkeeping and keeps the game kind of flowing quickly. So I liked that. And then the wound versus save allocation is what I wrote down, which is basically whenever you are successfully hit and wounded by a weapon that's a damage of 2, damage of 3, whatever it might be, do you take one save against each attack, and then each one you fail, you take that much damage, or do you take one save for each damage? Now, whenever I first started playing Age of Sigmar in the first few games, I did it as the second way. So if a weapon was damage 3 but only had one attack, you made 3 saves, one against each potential damage. And then, I can't remember exactly who it was, but I saw someone playing it the other way, and I went back and reread the rules, and I thought, okay, that makes sense. I see why that's been the way you've interpreted it, so I flipped it. And on the one hand, I liked it because it gave a little bit more of an edge to the defense in a game that is so offensively heavy. Because, you know, if you made that one save, then you've eradicated 2 or 3 points of damage, which is huge. But on the other hand, you know, as the attacker, it is so much more mentally and psychologically deflating to have all of that negated so much more easily, that I'm glad that they ended up ruling that you save for each point of damage. So if you get hit by the one attack and it's a damage of 3, then you take 3 saves. And for each one that you successfully save, you take obviously one less wound than you would have. It operates the same as if, at that point, it operates the same as if you had 3 attacks at 1 damage each that had successfully wounded. So I liked that. Again, it does kind of put a little bit more weight, shall we say, towards offensive units in a game that's already imbalance towards offense, which I'm not complaining about. It's just a mechanic of the game and the way the game is designed. But those are the only real points that I felt strong one or the other about in the FAQ. I'm glad GW finally did it. Obviously, the game hasn't been out that long, and it's nice to see that GW is kind of continuing their trend positively in my eyes of engaging the community more, having that kind of broader spectrum of price range, and finally actually giving players some deals in their start collecting kits and some of their other bundles. But that's going to be it for this one. So until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.